The Trees by Enrich, Class 10, Poem number 8 in the subject English, prepared by VGR. The Trees by Enrich. About the poetess, Edwin Cicely Rich was an American poet, essayist, and feminist. She was called one of the most widely read and influential poets of the second half of the 20th century, and was credited with bringing the oppression of women and lesbians to the forefront of poetic. She was born on 16th May 1929 in Baltimore, Maryland, United States, and died at 27th March 2012, Santa Cruz, California, United States. Her occupation: she was a poet, a nonfiction and writer, essayist. Awards she has received as National Book Award for Poetry, Ruth Lilly Poetry Prize, and more. Her work comes under the genre poetry or nonfiction. Her notable work, Diving into the Wreck. She has published 19 volumes of poetry, 3 collections of essays, and other writings. Rich's work of the 1960s and 70s began to show the sign of that radicalization. Moving her family to New York in 1966, Rich's collections from this period include Necessities of Life, Leaflets, The Will to Change, all of which feature looser lines and radical political content. Rich examined and challenged social norms, the imbalance of power between men and women. This poem, The Trees, from her book Necessities of Life. Here you can able to see the picture of the poet, Adrian Rich. Here you can able to see the picture of the writer Adrian Rich, her books, A Wild Patient Has Taken Me This Far, The Fact of a Door Frame, Your Native Land, Your Life, Essential Essays, Later Poems, Selected and New, Amends, Sources, A Change of World, Blood, Bread and Poetry, Diving into the Wreck, and Necessities of Life. From this book we are getting this poem, The Trees. Here you can able to see the different patterns of trees available in this earth. The forest, each and every tree which makes a wonderful forest. You can see the roots, how deeply it penetrated into the earth. The way the branches, the twigs, and the boughs and the branches is clearly depicted in this picture, a trees. Introduction. The poem has a symbolic meaning. The trees are an extended metaphor for women. The poet says that the women have rested, healed, and recovered, and are ready for their primary purpose, to renew the empty forest of mankind. The poet talks about trees symbolically. They refer to women who have been healed and are ready to move out of their houses to fulfill their primary purpose, to renew the forest of mankind. As women have remained indoors, the forest has become empty, the birds and insects rendered shelterless. The trees. Central idea of the poem. The poem The Trees by Adrian Rich shows the conflict between man and nature. With the growth and development of society, human beings have used nature for their own benefit and caused a lot of harm to it. In order to use natural resources like forests, minerals, etc., men have forgotten the importance of nature. The poet wants to give the message that the presence of a few trees inside our homes doesn't become equal to nature. It is a very false idea of nature. Real nature is outside, in the forest that we have destroyed. The trees in the speaker's house want to break the walls of the house and move to the forest, which has become empty. The birds can sit again on their branches. The insects can hide there and the sun rays can disappear under the shadow of the trees. The poem tells us how the trees want to break free from the walls that humans have put around them and go out in the forest. The trees having a normal central idea we have come across. Now, the theme of the poem. What the theme conveys us the women's freedom in the society. The poet talks about the trees symbolically. As women have remained indoors, the forest has become empty, the birds and insects rendered shelterless. The sun's rays do not have the tree trunks and leaves to fall upon and thus reach the earth. She says that the forest will be full of trees the next morning. The roots of the trees are working hard to separate from the floor of the veranda, but they have remained fixed. The leaves and branches are moving towards the glass windows. They are desperate to move out, just like a newly discharged patient who has not recovered completely moves to the exit door of the hospital in a hurry. The poet is sitting in her house with the doors of the veranda open. She is writing letters but does not mention this movement of the trees. It is night time, the sky is clear, and a bright moon is visible. She can smell the leaves and lichen which seems to be calling out desperately. She hears the glass of the window pane breaking. The trees are moving out, and the fast blowing wind embraces them. As the trees have reached the forest, the tall and strong oak tree overshadows the moon, and it seems that the moon has been broken into several pieces. Now we are entering into the poem stanza 1. The trees inside are moving out into the forest. The forest that was empty all these days, where no birds could sit, no insect hide, no sun bury its feet in shadow. The forest that was empty all these nights will be full of trees by morning. Empty means vacant, hollow, or missing. Insect here means small arthropod. Bury means covering something so that it is not visible. Shadow here means shade. From the stanza, what we understand, the speaker of the poem observes that the trees in his house are moving outside into the forest, which has been empty for a long time. It is important to understand that the trees are not actually moving, but it has been used as an imagery by the poet to show the destroyed forest and the false nature that humans have tried to keep in their houses. Since the forest outside was empty, no birds could sit on the branches of trees, no insects could hide in trees, and sunlight could never disappear under the shadows of the trees. The speaker feels that the empty forest will be full of trees by the next morning. So, this is unrealistic as the trees are immovable, and hence, we realize that the poem has a symbolic meaning. We interpret that trees refer to females who have healed themselves and are ready to move out of their homes into the forest to fulfill their primary purpose of filling the world with mankind. So the literary device used in the first stanza is personification. Sun bury its feet. Sun has been personified here. And enjambment technique is also used. The continuation of the sentence to the next line. From the line, the forest that was still the trees by morning, you can find the enjambment. Anaphora technique is used in second line, begin with a no. And imagery, the trees inside are moving out into the forest. It shows a kinesthetic imagery. So these are the literary devices we come across in the first stanza. Stanza number 2. All night the roots work to disengage themselves from the cracks in the veranda floor. The leaves strain towards the glass. Small twigs are stiff with exertion. Long cramped boughs shuffling under the roof, like newly discharged patients, half dazed moving to the clinic doors. Here, Disengage means free or remove, and strain here means tension or pressure. Twigs here means a branch or a small stem. Exertion means try or effort. Cramped here means restricted, shrunk or stretched, a long stretch. Okay. Boughs here means branch. Shuffling means mixing or changing the place from one to the other area. Discharged here means send out or to leave. Dazed means surprised or stunned. Stiff here means hard, and clinic here represents the hospital. Here you can able to see the picture of the boughs and twigs. Here you can able to see the boughs very clearly, the twigs and the boughs. The twigs and the boughs are clearly depicted in these pictures. You can able to see the twigs here, where the flowers are stick to them is the twigs, and the boughs. Boughs are nothing other than branches. Okay, the branches and the twigs, where the flower is stick to the twigs. So here is an example for boughs and twigs in this picture. In the second stanza, it seems like the trees work silently in the night in order to complete the mission of getting free from the boundaries of the house. Therefore, they work all night to free themselves through the cracks on the veranda floor. The leaves of the trees tried very hard to put a lot of pressure on the glass so that they could break it. The small twigs have become very hard due to applying so much pressure to free themselves. The larger branches of the trees that have shrunk because of being inside the wall and under the roof, where they cannot grow much. They try to move slowly from there and look like newly discharged patients from a hospital who become half shocked on coming to the outside world. So we can say that women are desperate for a change, and their effort is compared to that made by a patient who has been released from the hospital, and he tries to move out in a hurry although he is confused. So maybe because they are half conscious and are under the influence of some medication, they are unsteady but in a hurry to leave the clinic. So the literary devices used in this stanza is enjambment, the continuation of sentence to the next line from the line leaves triangle half based. You find the enjambment technique used in the stanza. Simile is also used. The trees are compared to patients here. The patients, those who are want to discharge from the hospital. Okay, so the trees are compared to the patients, discharged patients from the clinic. Personification is also used. The twigs and boughs have been personified here. So these are the literary devices used in the second stanza. Now stanza number 3. I sit inside doors open to the veranda, writing long letters, in which I scarcely mention the departure of the forest from the house. The night is fresh, the whole moon shines in a sky still open. The smell of the leaves and lichen still reaches like a voice into the rooms. Here you can able to see the picture of the lichen, the forest, and the nighttime vision. Here scarcely means barely, hardly. Departure here represents the leaving, and lichen means a crusty patches of bushes of fungus and algae on tree trunks, having a distinct smell. It makes a distinct smell, and it would be used for the edible purpose also, for making food also we can use the lichen. Here you can able to see the different patterns of the trees and the tree trunks, its boughs and twigs, and different color patterns of the leaves of the trees. So from that paragraph, the speaker, who could be the poet herself, sits in her house, writing long letters, the doors of which open to the veranda. She hardly mentions in her letter about the trees that are moving out to the empty forest. It is a full moon night where the moon is shining in the open sky and the night is very fresh. The poet can smell the leaves and lichens coming from the trees that reach her like a voice. So in the stanza, she says that the night is very clear. She can see the complete moon which is shining. The smell of leaves and leaves is like a voice which is yelling and expressing a desire for freedom from the confines of the house. So the literary device used in the stanza is alliteration, long letters LL, forest from FF, sky still SS, leaves and lichen LL. So these letters are repeated. So alliteration is used in this stanza. Endearment also you can find from the sentence from the words doors open till the house. And imagery is also used in the stanza. The poet has tried to create a scene in which she is observing all these things happenings. The night is fresh, the room is filled with the lichens and leaf smell, and it is yelling for freedom. It is a voice of the desire for freedom. So it's a imagery part is used in this stanza. Now stanza number 4. My head is full of whispers, which tomorrow will be silent. Listen, the glass is breaking. The trees are stumbling forward into the night. Winds rush to meet them. The moon is broken like a mirror. Its pieces flash now in the crown of the tallest oak. So here, whispers means voices, a low hushing voice, a murmur. Silent here represents quiet. Stumbling means walk unsteadily or trip over. And a rush here means hurry. And flash means glare or shine. And oak here means a name of a tree, strong tree used for making furniture. We call it as oak tree. Where you can able to see the glass of a window in a breaking condition, and the trees are moving outside, and you can find the moon is in a shattered form, and it's shining till. Here also you can have a picture of different patterns of the a different view of the moon. Inside you can find the shattering form. A full whole moon you can able to see here. Here also you can able to see the moon view which is in the form of break form. Still it's shining after the breakages, still it's shining, started to shine. Okay. So the speaker in the fourth stanza wants to say the readers, listen to the sounds coming from the leaves and lichens of the trees. These sounds will not be there in the morning, as the trees will move out to the forest in the night and will not be in the house by morning. So now the speaker can hear the glass breaking due to the efforts of the twigs. As the glass breaks, the trees hurry outside, and in doing so, they fall on each other and get struck at different places. As the trees go in the open, it seems like the wind is moving fast towards them to meet them. The tail trees can finally stand straight as they are free. They are so tall that they have broken the moon into pieces like a broken mirror. The moon now sits like a crown on the head of our tall oak trees. Again, the use of moon is an imagery to show that between the ground and the sky stands the trees, and one can only look at the part of the moon and not the full moon from under the trees. So in this stanza, we find that the poet's head is full of slow sounds made by the trees, which are desperate to move out. These sounds will not be heard the next day because the poet asks the reader to listen carefully as change is about to take place. So here the literary device simile is used. The moon is compared to a mirror. Moon is broken like a mirror. So the simile is used in this fourth stanza. Now the poetic device of overall simile has used in most of the stanzas in the sentences like newly discharged patients still reaches like a voice in the out into the rooms. The moon is broken like a mirror. And imagery you can find in most of the places, like its pieces flash now in a crown of the tallest oak. It's beautiful imagery created in the last stanza. And about the rhyming scheme, there is no rhyme scheme you can find in this poem. The poem is in free verse. The poem is in free verse. Here you can able to see the picture of the trees which are beautifully arranged. You can see the branches, the stem, the boughs, and the twigs clearly, where the single tree moved into the group and make a forest and created a new mindset. It want to create a new life. So here we find that a single tree from the house, after getting the freedom, it want to create a new life among the other trees. Here also you can find the forest, which is full of occupied by the trees. So now recapitulation. In this poem, I is the voice of the speaker of the poem Enrich. The poetess describes the importance of freedom, especially the women's freedom. A poem, the tree, is the voice with the body engaged in the activities and sensing intuitions that are not organic to the conventions of a nature poem. This is actually an unnatural poem that narrates the struggle of a population of trees to escape the confined surrounding of a greenhouse. Through the trees, this poem demonstrates the unsuitability of the language itself as a greenhouse. The poetess is the witness for the trees' exodus, but making distances herself from participating in the making of something out of the spectacle. She can't sit and write too. Even though the speaker addresses the audience, her own head is full of whispers, and she is an audience as well. We, however, the audience to the poem, are compelled with the command. The speaker reaches across the barrier between the poem and the audience, a transaction that occurs on the page and says for listening. And the poet articulates her consciousness of the many levels of inner and outer and the blurring of the boundaries between them. In the poem, the trees are in the house of the poet. The roots work all night to disengage themselves from the cracks of the floor in the veranda. The leaves are making efforts to move towards the glass. An open door is for the night, and the whole moon and the sky is available to the speaker. This tree is at the same time through this door, the smell of leaves still reaches back in. The speaker's head is another interior and implicity entered by the whispers. The poetess is especially intrigued by the image of the trees, similar to the newly discharged patients. The poet is making a comparison to the long cramped branches which are shuffling under the roof with the newly discharged patients from the hospital. As they are moving towards the hospital doors after the long illness, the branches have cramped under the gaps of the roof. Therefore, they want to get out into the open to spread themselves in the fresh air. Conclusion. So the tree is a short symbolic poem and it focuses on the movement of trees that are initially indoors but seeking to escape to freedom in the forest. The trees represent the nature and womanhood in particular. This famous poem by Enrich comments upon the theme of resurrection and re-engagement with the life. The persona of the poem describes how, piece by piece, she re-enters the world that she had left before. If we examine the persona, we can see that this poem is centered around the central theme of struggle with the world in relation to role and identity. The persona is clearly confused and is now re-entering the world, having left it with the desire to have a second chance at living. This indicates the way in which the persona is deliberately moving on from how she formerly considered her necessities of life and has now changed her perspective and is ready to re-enter the world with a different mindset. The poem, therefore, narrates one woman's courageous decision to reverse an earlier choice made in her life and to try and engage in the risky and hazardous enterprises of living in the world rather than sitting out in the game of life. So it talks about the women's freedom. They have the freedom to go out and do their job. That is depicted in this poem clearly. Thank you. I hope you understand the poem, The Trees, through this video. I think This poem will help you to learn and prepare for your board exams too. If you think it is okay, you can give a like and subscribe it. Thank you once again.